so much for sitting down with us. We really
Happy to be
appreciate
here.
it. So I always want to start off the interview with the hardest question, and of course that's, what is your order when you go to Biscuitville?
Oh, 100%. It's country ham and cheese on a skinny biscuit, fries, and a Diet Pepsi.
You guys are one of the few companies that have a large spread across the Southeast that produce food that you source locally. Can you tell me a little bit about that process of how you're finding farmers and how you're finding farms and how you think that affects the quality of your meals that you're selling?
Absolutely. I mean, it's our favorite story. And it's interesting how it happened because Maurice Jennings, our founder, also an Elon grad, just naturally, when he started this biscuit idea out of his pizza restaurants, just naturally migrated toward friends. And in North Carolina, there's a lot of agriculture. There's a lot, there are a lot of choices for that sort of thing. So he just started partnering with friends of his. He was also in the flour business. And so when I started working there, they already had a lot of great local partnerships, right? Family-owned companies, local companies that just had great business practices. And so we were like, wow, why don't we incorporate that into the brand? Like, a lot of people don't know that. It's just something we took for granted. So when we were sort of rebranding and trying to figure out who do we want to be when we grew up, and what's something that the bigger competitors can't take from us is our community, right? And our relationship with our community. So we said, the sky's the limit. Let's just see where the end is. And let's try everything that we can buy locally, let's buy locally. And so we've done that. And so now about 90% of the bags that leave our restaurant have at least one local ingredient. And we have some meals that can include up to 5 local ingredients. So that's up, Ohio is our furthest north. And then Sevierville, Tennessee is our furthest west. But anywhere within sort of a 600-mile radius we consider local. It's not China, it's not California, it's not South America. So we're super proud of it.
Do you think that customers can feel that sense of community when it comes to the food that they're ordering?
That is a great question. We are literally asking that question right now as we're trying to figure out what do the next 10 years look like. I do, just by nature of the food we're serving, think it tastes better. It's certainly cleaner. People should feel a lot better eating what we're serving. Our eggs are from North Carolina and Virginia farmers. Our tomatoes come from North Carolina. So these are places that we can see and that we can trust. And there's the other thing we take for granted is you don't have things being trucked in 14 different styles to get across the world. So yeah, I think they do truly taste better. Whether people recognize it and it makes them feel more connected is sort of a question we're still trying to answer. I think it's partially why people support us, but I'm not sure everybody really gets the story or connects with the story. So I'll be curious.
Is there something that you want to do to kind of push that narrative out there more?
Well, we feel like we do it a lot, right? I feel like I talk about it all the time. I feel like it's in all of our ads. I think what we're learning is we need to be more overt. Like we subtly say this sausage is from a family-owned company in Tennessee, or we sort of speak facts. I'm not sure we are being as overt as we would like to be, and it's something we're working on actually this year for sort of relaunching ourselves next year. So something we take very seriously, obviously.
So I've heard you mention a couple times the rebrand and kind of what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Can you tell us a little bit about your start with the company and where you see yourself going?
Sure. So I just hit my 15th year, which seems incredible. When I started, my daughter was, I think, 4 years old. My son was about 7 or 8 years old. So I was kind of looking to step down a little bit into motherhood. And when I grew up with Biscuitville, so I was super familiar with the brand and loved it. And I kind of came in thinking this can just sort of be a fun role. I'm not having to travel a lot. And then I just fell in love with the idea that the company could expand and bring what I think is just highly unique and fantastic for our communities, which is a locally owned business who are supporting local suppliers and local families and really giving food that's made truly from scratch, which a lot of people say but don't mean. And so I just became super excited about sharing that vision with the family and trying to get the family to see what they had. And so as soon as they sort of engaged in this opportunity to grow, they got really excited, and then the role just kept expanding from that. And it's been a great journey. We built a great team and very united. And we now are up to, I think, 86 restaurants, 85 restaurants.
Wow. So a lot of people don't know this about Biscuitville, but it actually is a family-owned business. You took over as CEO from Bernie, whose father was the founder. Can you talk to me a little bit about what it was like for you coming into that family business and keeping those values, but also looking to grow?
I think the reason I've been successful in this role is because I appreciated very early on what the family was looking for. They're very high integrity, always do the right thing. When in 2008, when the market was just crazy, and a lot of people were inclined in their business models to just reduce the food or increase the price or compromise in some way. One thing I immediately loved about the Jennings family is they were like, under no circumstance will we compromise the quality or the portion size. We will figure out other ways to get there than this. So I didn't ever have to wonder how they would react to any issue. They're always going to do the right thing. And so I aligned with that. I love that. I love working in that environment. I think most of the people that work for Biscuitville are there because they align with that. So I think it was easy to adjust to, and I appreciate it and think the company is better because of the way they lead it.
Do you have any advice for business students that in their future careers are navigating situations like that and having to adjust?
From family to non-family? It's complicated. It's all complicated, but when it's family and it's generational, there's a lot of pride in that. So I think the biggest piece of advice would be really earnestly find out what it is that the family honors and what's important to them, because you make a lot of assumptions, right? And so Bernie and I and the family do a great job of communicating to make sure I'm not confusing what they really do value over what I think they might value. So I think staying very connected on that is important. And then the other thing that Bernie and I did when I moved into this role was we did what's called a RACI, which is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So it's like, on this particular topic, where are we on that? And so we did that with every major part of the company decision making. And we sat down for a year and agreed on it, right? Like, what do you have decision making for, and what do I have decision making for? And that created an enormous amount of clarity. And I always recommend that to people who are coming into a family-owned company.
Kind of going off of those family values, you guys have this life after 2 policy, which means your restaurants close and it gives employees opportunities to go and have a life outside of work. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you think that's important and why you guys began doing that?
At one point, the family actually stayed open later, so we had dinner. And Maurice felt like, and the family felt like, for the business they were doing after the most important day part for us, which is breakfast, it was just kind of taking people away from what they loved. So they thought, why don't we just really concentrate on breakfast, keep ourselves open until 2, and maximize sales during that day part. And so I think when they agreed to do that, it became really apparent that they were attracting a very different type of employee, right? The guy who wants to be a soccer coach, or the lady who wants to be very involved in her church, or all the things you can do when you're able to be home by 2:30, right? And a lot of our employees are moms and dads, so they like being able to pick their kids up from preschool or middle school. So I think, as soon as we made the decision, I think it made so much more sense and started to define who we were and attract a different kind of talent. And we've had many consultants come in and tell us how crazy we are not to expand our hours. And I'm just really proud of the family for sticking to their guns on what is ultimately a quality of life company.
What is your response to those consultants or those people that say that you're losing out on opportunities or profits by closing at 2 p.m.?
That is a really good question. I think it goes back to some advice that I've gotten in my past, which is you really have to know what you stand for and you really have to know what you believe in. Because it's very easy for people from the outside to come in and look at it sort of superficially. And so I think being really, really grounded and rooted in your whys and being very clear about why you have your whys really keep you more solidly kind of firm on what's important to you. Because I think companies make that mistake a lot, where they stand for something really important. Somebody from the outside said, but you can make more money, or it could be easier, and all of those things, but it really starts to degrade the culture or what your people are there for in the first place. So yeah, it's not always easy to know when to say no to people you're paying to come in and give you advice.
I hear you talk a lot about the culture and the feel of your company. If you had to describe that to someone outside the company who maybe hasn't heard of Biscuitville before, how would you do that?
One of my favorite parts of being at Biscuitville, particularly now after we've built this team, is we have what we call cultural norms. So we have 19 of them, and we spent about a year or two, and about 2,000 total employees were involved in the whole process, right? And it is really, in this odd way, it's sort of this united agreement that we said, look, if we all need to agree on things, right? You can't have a culture where everybody's doing whatever they want. So we said, let's agree on how we behave and how we treat each other. And once we all agree on them, once we can all agree, we're going to sort of write them down, and we're going to agree that anybody that doesn't do these things can't stay. And we're going to mean it. So we have to really believe in what we're saying. So we noodled around with that for several years and finally felt really good about it. So we printed it and we called it our cultural norms. Everybody in the company gets a copy every year. And my job has been to absolutely enforce that if you do not behave this way, you cannot stay at Biscuitville. And it has created this culture where people feel like they created their own environment, and therefore they're also being asked to follow whatever those guidelines are. And I think one of the most proud moments was, we have several, I have many favorites of our cultural norms, but one of them is it's the communicator's responsibility to communicate. So you can't just yell at me and tell me something, I don't totally understand what you're saying, and then you blame it on me, right? In our culture, if you're the one that has something to say, you're responsible for making sure I hear it and buy into whatever you're saying, if that makes sense. And so when you start to have people even in the restaurants say things back to me like, well, it's the communicator's job to communicate, it just makes me proud because we all agreed that's important and they recognize it, but they're also holding me accountable for that. So it's been a very defining process for us.
That's really interesting. So the communicator's job to communicate is a big one. Do you have other values that you see in your restaurants daily?
I do. Well, one of the things that I think people enjoy working for us in operations for is we essentially have a profit share program. So you can make up to 20% of whatever profit, unlimited, you earn in your restaurant, you can take 20% of that profit, right? So it's sort of an unlimited opportunity to be successful. However, what enforces that and makes that also another part of our value system is, I can't remember exactly how it's articulated, but essentially it's we value people and we compensate people based on how they execute. So your performance, and we call it pay for performance, as opposed to race, gender, sexual orientation, where you're from, whether you have a high school degree. Like the premise is none of that should matter. If you walk in the door and you get results and you follow these norms, you should be able to be as successful as you want to be. And so that's also created this culture of, people like to say, don't be biased and treat people with respect. And we really tried to figure out how do you actually put that into action. And so pay for performance has, in this really interesting way, defined what that looks like when it comes to success at Biscuitville. And people appreciate that. That was a very long-winded way of saying it. But people appreciate being judged is not the right word, but being compensated and appreciated for how they perform and nothing else. And that has really attracted a very diverse family of people that have joined our teams. And I think it has a lot to do with that. Another one is obviously dignity and respect. There's just zero tolerance for lack of respect for other people. This is an interesting one. One that we have is you have to give somebody 2 weeks notice before you can change their calendars. I've worked hard to prepare for 2 weeks. I have goals I have to hit. You can't just come in and say, I'm going to blow up your Wednesday because I wasn't thoughtful enough to give you advance notice. And so it was a hard one for people to understand. And we certainly have exceptions to that rule. But the idea is be disciplined and respectful of other people's time. And you would be amazed how many people come to me and say, you're supposed to give me 2 weeks notice. And they're right. And they hold me accountable. And I love that.
So going back to your pay for performance, that's actually something that's pretty unique to Biscuitville. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys came up with that premise and how executing that looks like?
Maurice Jennings actually started it. He was very entrepreneurial, obviously. And he really felt like the more the operator owned the success of the restaurant, the more engaged they would be and better they would operate it. So it was his idea to sort of almost be a co-partner and share in the profit. So that has grown over the years. It's morphed for sure. But the essential premise is we have what we call a balanced scorecard. And it has eight KPIs that they have to hit. And you can either be on target and get 10% of the profit. You can be above target and get 15% of profit, or you can be well above target and get 20%. So it's also related to how well they execute and perform. It's a defining part of our culture. And I always say I hope I'm here when one of our operators makes $500,000 because they will have earned it for sure.
What does the best day look like for you as the CEO of Biscuitville?
You're probably not going to believe this, but my husband will attest. Being in the restaurants and observing the talent that we have in the restaurants is so inspiring. I mean, I walk in, I was at several restaurants last week, and Thursday we opened Charlotte last Monday. So I spent some time with them and went to Kinston and a few restaurants on the way. And I am just always inspired by the people that work in our restaurants. They have great ideas. They're so committed. They work hard. They put up with the public, which everybody should get paid extra for. And I just, they have great stories. They're great moms, great dads, great coaches. And they just do a great job for us, and they make me proud. So my best day is being able to be in the restaurants, getting to know our people better.
Is there anything you learned as an Elon student that you think really prepared you for the role you're in now?
Gosh, so many things. It's funny coming here and thinking about today and the talk we're going to be doing later. I was like, what are the most important things I took away from Elon? And there's just so many, it's impossible to name them all. But I think for me, I love the small classrooms and access to the professors and being able to really not just superficially learn from them, but really be able to go in and say, hey, I have a question about this, or I thought about this. And then being accessible was a huge one. I love the hands-on nature of Elon. I always felt like I wasn't just learning from a book, that I had access to the things I was learning. And they're even better today, which is kind of remarkable. And we've just always had great leadership. I was here with Leo Lambert, now Dr. Book. They just create such a great learning environment here, and it's a beautiful campus.
That is true.
Yes.
Well, I'll wrap it up because I know you have the talk you have to get to, but is there anything I didn't ask you that you think it's important for people to know?
No, I'll just more make a comment, but I have 2 Gen Zs. My daughter is turning 20 and my son's turning 24. And we talk about this a lot, but I know this generation, it's always this way, right? It was that way when I was in school. You guys have such an opportunity to really reshape the future of the country. I mean, more than any other. You've had access to so much more, and you've had such a different experience. And I think you guys are so well informed, but you're also, we were very trusting, and I think there's some beauty in that. But I think it's good to have a healthy skepticism and ask questions and be curious, and so confident. So I have so much faith in this generation. I'm so excited. I say all the time, I hope I can live long enough to kind of see what you guys end up producing, because it's just I'm thrilled, especially Elon grads, of course.